Good evening, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this chilly Friday evening in Pittsburgh. And I hope wherever you're at, if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, that it's not quite as chilly. But unless you like the fall weather, and if it is, then to quote Mark Davison and Matty Pepperell, good on you, mate. But speaking of YouTube, before I begin, I'd like to ask you to please subscribe and like our YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day, including this show, The Hangover, the day after every Steelers game, and a program reminder. There will not be a hangover this Monday because this Monday the Steelers are playing the Browns on Monday Night Football. And I believe at last I checked, the hangover will be on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. We bring you the Schobert show. Of course, we have a preview show every Thursday. We have a post-game show after every game. We have Know Your Enemy with Jeffrey Benedict and Michael Beck. I watched on Wednesday. Jeffrey did a great job as the host with Chris Pugh, who also has a great podcast. And they're in the Browns. The Bears insider or analyst that they had on. He did a great job. So it was a really enjoyable show. What else we have? Is that it? Oh, yeah, Touchdown Under. We have that every week. The mates from Australia, as the previously mentioned, Matty Pepperell and Mark Davison. We have a whole host of shows every week. So please check those out. And you can also check those out live on Facebook each and every week and just about every night. And if you don't catch those shows live when they're taking place, you can always catch them after the fact on any audio platform. Doesn't matter which one you use, which one you're fond of, we're on that platform. And it's a growing platform. It's grown so much over the last year or so, since really, I guess, the summer of 2020. And we have audio-only shows that you can catch after the fact on an audio platform, and those include From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey Benedict, The Stat Geek with Dave Schofield, Let's Try with Jeff Hartman, The Live Mic with Michael Beck, The War Room with Matty Pepperell. Chris Pugh has a show on there, what he's talking about. I believe that's his show. If not, I'm in trouble. But please check all those out. And, of course, check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. We're bringing news, commentary, film breakdown. Any Steeler-related news, we're one of the first to bring it to you. As we like to say, it's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. I think it's the hardest working Steelers site on the internet. It's hard to top, so you will not be sorry. I've been with them for 11 years, and I'm very proud of it. So please check out Behind the Steel Curtain. And, of course, I want to welcome people in the live chat. Jared Devil was the first one here again. Like that Jeopardy contestant who always wins every week, every night. Steeler Chick 46 is with us. Brad Jewett, of course, Mark Davison. Good day, Tony, he says. Buck Dancer, Brian Brown, Kathy Ford, George Teston, Bert Tavares, Wes Hickok, always in the all caps. He says, Tony, my man. Same to you, Wes. Same to you. I'm getting pumped up for a great show. Robert Mullins, Vodka Drinker, Clarence Washington. And I think that's it for now. Yes. I'm sure other people will join. I'm really stoked about having a awesome show. Devin Logan's with us. He says, hey, Tony, what's up? I'm just looking forward to having a great show, Devin. Hope I can bring you guys some great content tonight. So let's talk about last Sunday and in my opinion, a very pleasant and what's the word I'm looking for? A very it was a pleasant. I wouldn't say pleasant victory because I think we always expect the Steelers to beat the Browns, but a very satisfying win. The 15-10 win over the Browns at Cleveland's First Energy Stadium. I think it was crucial. Like I said last week, that it wasn't do or die, but it was pretty close. You wanted to kind of erase that really ugly 1-3 start, And I think this win over the Browns kind of puts them back on, even though they're one game over 500, metaphorically speaking, it puts them back on even ground. Like all the damage that was done with the loss to the Raiders, loss to the Bengals. Of course, they lost to the Packers too, but that was expected. I think this puts them back on even ground. I think it gets them back to an even footing, because I think if you were talking about what their record would be after 7 games back in the summer, I think maybe you kind of anticipated they would beat the Raiders and the Bengals, and they might lose to the Browns. Well, they lost to the Raiders and the Bengals, and those two teams were much better than anybody thought. And the Browns, I think they were expected to be much better. I mean, I don't think they're a bad team, but I think people were anticipating that they would take that next step and be the class of the division. And they still might be before all was said and done, but right now they're struggling. They have a lot of drama in their organization. They're 4-4. So, they are 4-3, meaning the Steelers, but I think they got there probably in a different way than most people would have predicted back in the summer. So, this win kind of makes up for those, at least one of those 2 losses that nobody anticipated before the season started. So, my thoughts on the game, again, I thought it was an extraordinary win. I thought it was a very satisfying win. And I thought the offense showed a lot of progress. It didn't show up on the stat sheet necessarily, well, at least not on the scoreboard. But if you look at I wrote these down. If you look at the stats for that game, they obviously, Ben passed for 255 yards. He averaged about 7 yards per attempt. He passed 35 times. They ran the ball 32 times for 115 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. Not great numbers, not explosive numbers, but great balance. And not because they passed 35 times and rushed 32 times. That's not why it was great balance. It was great balance because they were effective, relatively speaking, both with the run and the pass. And I think that's what you always want from an offense. I think when they think balance, they think they think quantity, but really balance is, in my opinion, is effectiveness. And they were balanced on both the run and the pass. And Najee Harris, I mean, first of all, the line was extraordinary for the run, I think. I mean, I shouldn't say extraordinary because they only averaged 3.6 yards per carry, so you can't say extraordinary. But I think the line played as well as it has all year, blocking for the run. And that was great to see, because I think it really, even though Najee Harris has been such a valuable weapon up to this point, I think he really showed you what he can do when he has blocking on Sunday. And what I like about this rookie right now is how he's finishing off runs. It seems like he's always got his shoulders over his, if I'm saying it right, over his knees, over his hips. He's always plowing forward. He's always finishing off runs. He's always moving the pile. And to me, that screams rookie stud, or stud rookie. He's if Mike Tomlin is intent on running him until the wheels fall off, he's got a long time to go, because I think he's got a lot of he had a lot of work in college, meaning Najee Harris. He had a huge workload, but I think he's got plenty of years left and plenty of tread on those tires right now. And how about that touchdown run? I mean, every time I see that the basically 5-yard Superman dive into the end zone to give the Steelers their first touchdown of the game in the second half, I want to jump out of my chair. I mean, that was just, what athleticism. Again, this is a young stud who is only just beginning as far as being a special running back in the NFL. I mean, he looked like Walter Payton diving over the pile back in the day, even though there really wasn't a pile there. He just took off from the 4-yard line and dove head first into the end zone. He looked like Michael Jordan taking off from the foul line to give you one of his signature patented dunks back in the day. I mean, it was just a great thing to see. And I've been saying, I think he's he's a 3-down back. People keep talking about, what about the backups? McFarland, Balaj, Benny Snell football. But, I think they brought him in here, meaning Najee Harris, that they drafted him with the intent of making him a 3-down back. And he reminds me so much of I keep saying this, but it's true. He reminds me so much of LeVeon Bell. He's probably a more powerful runner than Bell was, but same kind of thing. He's big, he's tall, and of course he doesn't have great speed. Neither did Bell, but he can break one off. He can get you tough yards, and of course he can catch the ball out of the backfield. And according to Ben Roethlisberger, he's getting better at picking up the blitz. I think he did he credit him for helping Dan Moore against Myles Garrett on the touchdown catch by Pat Freiermuth, the second round pick. So Najee Harris is just a fantastic rookie, and I'll touch more on this later, but I can't imagine that there are still people out there that say that they should have went in another direction in the first round. Now that you see what Harris is capable of, and the fact that he was not going to be there in the second round, there's just no way. I don't know how you can still die on that hill of they should have drafted an offensive lineman or whatever. And of course, speaking of that, excuse me, that narrative, people are still questioning the Pat Freiermuth. Not many people, but some people, some really crazed, overzealous draft type people are still questioning the second round pick of Freiermuth out of Penn State. But this guy has number one tight end written all over him. He has Travis Kelce type talent, in my opinion, that level of a tight end. And you saw it on display with that touchdown when he fought off his defender in the back corner of the end zone. He bobbled the ball, and rightfully so. It was the defender was basically shielding him from the ball. He bobbled it, corralled it, got both feet in bounds before falling to the ground. I mean, it was an incredible display of much like the Harris touchdown of athleticism. And I don't know how anybody can still be griping about those two draft picks. So, again, I thought the line played a lot. It's continuing to improve, and Dan Moore Jr. had his hands full, of course, with Myles Garrett. But I mean, he got through it, and if you can get through a full game against maybe the best edge rusher in the NFL right now, if you're talking about a edge rusher that puts his hand on the ground, and Myles Garrett, then if you can get through that, you can get through anything. I mean, yeah, he needed help. Yeah, he had his hands full. Yeah, he probably needed an extra pair of hands to deal with Garrett, but he got through it. And Ben was relatively clean on the day. I think he was sacked, twice, once by Garrett. So, if he's the kind of player that he looks like he could turn into, then he'll only learn and grow from this experience against Garrett. So kudos to Dan Moore Jr., who I'm starting to like more and more. I already love Kendrick Green. I fell in love with him when I saw how he celebrated being drafted, spiking his sunglasses and his whole family, showing that intensity in their living room that night. I mean, it was just it just reminded me of, I keep saying this, but it reminded me of David Putty, the face painting, the face painter scene in Seinfeld. I just love that kind of intensity from him, and I love the fact that you see him game in and game out, just like scrapping and jawing with people, and his teammates are always coming up to him and grabbing him kind of by the collar and saying, easy there, big fella. He's not afraid. He's not intimidated by his opponents, and that, to me, that's a great character attribute. So I love Green, Dotson, and even Shukshakorfor. He had his mistakes in the game, but I think he's getting better. I think Shannon White brought that up the other day. He gave credit to Okorafor and how he's improved. And, obviously they're anchored kind of by Trey Turner, the veteran right guard. So I really like how the line is gelling. And like I talked about last week, when you have to talk about this team on a week by week basis, sometimes you're going to be critical. Sometimes you're going to be negative because you're reacting in the moment. You're reacting to just what happened, what just happened. And, the line looked really, really, looked like it did last year, but with a completely different cast earlier in the year. But the encouraging part, if you were willing to be that positive back then, was that they were all mostly newcomers. And, if they were as talented as the Steelers thought they were when they drafted them, mainly Green and Okorafor and Dotson and more, that they were going to gel into a cohesive unit. And obviously they're not there yet. They have a long way to go, but it looks like they're getting there. It looks like they're on the right path. And that's a great thing to see. With that in mind, they probably did leave some points on the board last week because of some untimely penalties by Okorafor and a couple other people in the first half. So they have to clean that up because had they lost that game last week, I don't think we'd be talking about how encouraged we were by the performances of Moore and the rest of the line. And of course, the top two draft picks. We'd be talking about how impotent the offense still is, but they won. And, it's better to, like Mike Tomlin always says, it's better to learn during a win than it is during a loss or after a loss. And to me, all the credit most of the credit for that win goes to the defense. I don't think the defense gets nearly enough credit for what they were able to do in that game against the Browns. And I think that's because it is such a good defense right now. It is basically borderlines on elite. And I think we're just starting to take the defense for granted because it has been so good for the last few years. But they did a masterful job at obviously stifling the Browns' rushing attack. Excuse me. And we know that's what the Browns like to do. They like to run the ball. They like to dictate the game that way rather than really putting it in Baker Mayfield's hands. But the Steelers would have none of it. And Nick Chubb really, with the exception of a couple plays here and there, was really not much of a factor. And they for as good as the Browns' offensive line is, and like Shannon White says, and like a lot of people say, it might be the best unit in football. But the defensive line, the front seven, won probably more battles than it lost against them on Sunday, and they deserve a lot of credit. And I think a play that's not getting talked about nearly enough was the forced fumble by Joe Schobert near the end of the game. It was the next to the last drive by the Browns. They were down by 5 points. Pittsburgh had taken the lead early in the fourth quarter on the Freiermuth touchdown, and it looked like the Browns were going to be in position to maybe take the lead when Schobert forced a fumble on Jarvis Landry. TJ Watt recovered, and the Browns had one more shot after that, and that was it. But if not for that forced fumble by Schobert there, who knows how that game turns out. So I think that play is being overlooked, and Schobert, there was a lot of excitement when he was brought in here. The night of the first preseason or the second preseason game back in August, and that excitement's kind of died down a bit. But that was a big play for that guy, and he needs to be commended for forcing it, because if there's one thing I'm kind of worried about right now with this defense is the lack of takeaways. They have 6 through 7 games. So they're on pace for less than one a game. And they were so prolific at taking the football away the last 2 years. And now it looks like they're back to their old ways, their old pre-2019 ways of averaging like 16, 17, 18, 19 takeaways a year. And it's a great defense. So, whenever we're having that issue from like 2011 through 2018, the defense wasn't quite as elite as it is now. It wasn't quite as good as it is now. So they needed to be more opportunistic. Whereas right now, I guess they don't necessarily need to be as opportunistic because it's such a good unit overall. But it would be nice to create more takeaways. I think first of all, that's what contending teams usually do. They have defenses that are opportunistic. Second of all, it would help out the offense even more. It would help it. The more you put that offense in premium field position, the better it's gonna be. It's not one of those offenses that can move 80 yards at will right now. So it needs all the help it can get. So I don't know how you can become more opportunistic. TJ Watt's pretty adept at creating takeaways, and Minkah Fitzpatrick was up until this year. I don't know what's going on with him right now, but they need their playmakers to step up and start making plays. So those are my thoughts on the Browns game. And at the 21:50 mark, I will take this opportunity to say goodbye to the first half of tonight's show. If you're watching me live on YouTube or Facebook, please don't go anywhere. If you're listening on an audio platform, well, I thank you for downloading part 1. But please hurry back and download part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I'm your host, as always, Tony Defio. And if you were watching part 1 live on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for sticking with me. If you downloaded part 1 on an audio platform and you decided to download part 2, I thank you for that. So thank you for joining me for part 2 of tonight's show. And before I continue, I have a $5 super chat from my main man, Ryan O'Toole, who joins the show. And he says, love your articles on the site. Well, thank you, Ryan. I love writing. It's my biggest passion in the world, really. Writing. Even bigger than the Steelers, but it's close. And he says, he continues, I read the articles and try to figure out who wrote them. I guess yours every time. Well, I really appreciate that, because anytime I write a popular article that gets a lot of traffic, I always get ugly emails. So it's nice to get a $5 compliment. So I appreciate that. And we all thank you for the donation. That's nice of you. Thank you for the kind words. I love writing, and I love that, again, more than anything. So it's always nice to hear compliments about that. And who else joins the show? Michael O'Malley, Steelers Pittsburgh. I think that's all the new people. Joe Mannix. That's a new one. All right. So thank you all for joining me in this part of the show. All right. Owen David. By the way, if you haven't checked out Owen David, he's now the head of the Britsburg Nation over there in Britain, and he's churning out podcasts on a regular basis. So please check him out. He's a really passionate fan. He really loves the Steelers. He really loves to produce content about them. So you got to check Owen David out on Twitter. He's a really great fan and a great part of Steeler Nation, and a great part of the show every week. So what do I want to talk about next? I want to talk about Ben Roethlisberger's emotion at the end of the Cleveland game. And that's, as I wrote about the other day, Ryan mentioned my articles. Right after the Steelers play a game at 1 o'clock, I always try to run to my computer and get my post-game thoughts down in article form. And, as the right after Roethlisberger threw the incomplete pass into the end zone, sort of the Hail Mary to end the game, in a matter of speaking, to run the clock out. I started walking to my computer, but as I did, I looked over to Roethlisberger, or back to my TV, and Roethlisberger was just really displaying this really intense emotion, but positive emotion. And, like the way he was hugging his teammates and pumping his fists and screaming, you would have thought it was a Super Bowl win or a playoff win. But I think that's because that game meant so much to him, because the last time he faced the Browns at Heinz Field back on January 10th, that playoff game, he was seen on the bench crying. He was sitting next to Pouncey, and tears were flowing down his face, his cheeks. And, I'm pretty sure in that moment, he was not sure if he would come back, if he was coming back for 2021. And he probably knew Pouncey was done. So, and of course, he knew that, a promising season, one that started out 11-0, just really imploded down the stretch, culminating in that loss to the Browns. And he was probably thinking, man, I thought this was going to be a really special year, and it just blew up in our faces at the end. Is this it for me? So you contrast that with how he looked at the end of that game the other day in Cleveland. And to me, I say this all the time, but I'll say it again. This is why sports is the greatest reality TV there is, because you just never know what's going to happen. But, to think that Roethlisberger was done last year, and to have, all those Browns fans, the national media, people, his detractors from all around the country and the world, kind of use the image of him crying, Roethlisberger's crying, to use that all off season to kind of like mock him and mock the Steelers. And, the Browns thought they had arrived because they won that playoff game. To see all that all off season. And, it was annoying, you kind of have to brush that off, but it was annoying to see that all off season. And for him, I'm sure he knew about it too. How could you not? He's a human being. I'm sure as much as these guys say that they don't pay attention, they pay attention to the outside chatter, at least occasionally. So to see that all off season, and to have him go in there, and he wasn't the main reason why they won, but he was the quarterback and he made plays, and especially at the end, to me, that was so gratifying. And again, it had to mean so much to him. It had to be such a special feeling for him. And, I don't know if this is his last year or not, but it more than likely is. And it was he probably knew it was the last time he was ever going to face them in Cleveland. And it kind of was the cherry on top of his dominance over them in Cleveland. And it just speaks volumes about this quote unquote rivalry that even at the very end, he can go in there and kind of orchestrate a win against a team that thought it was going places in 2021. And again, it still might be going places, but right now it's really struggling. I just love it. That's one of the reasons why I watch sports. I love it. It's I never fail to be surprised. I always think, all right, I've seen everything. And then, they not that what he did was had never been done before, but it was still great to see. And I just can't wait to see how these last 10 games play out for him. And if he has any magnificent performances left in his right arm before he decides to hang him up. So I'll always be appreciative of Ben Roethlisberger and what he's done for this organization the last 18 years. The 2 Super Bowl wins, the 3 appearances, the constant them constantly remaining in contention year in and year out, them never really being out of it with him as their quarterback. To me, it's something that in many ways he might be the greatest Steeler that's ever suited up for them. So, let's enjoy Ben while we can. There's might not be that many more games left with him, but even if he were to retire tomorrow, it would still be a magnificent journey by him. So those are my thoughts on Ben and what that win meant to him. And I just basically have one more thing I want to talk about before I open things up to questions and comments. And that's the idea of depth, quality depth, and how people spent the entire offseason just wringing their hands and just, over the team's lack of quality depth at various positions. And in some cases, it wasn't just quality. They thought that they had no depth, which every team has depth. It's just a matter of the level that you're looking for. So one of the ways that they went about addressing that was by ultimately in July signing Melvin Ingram, the veteran outside linebacker, to be their top reserve at the position, a guy who could play on the other side. And of course, he looked like a great acquisition as far as reserves went, up until you started hearing rumblings that he wanted to leave. He wanted to trade it because he didn't think he was getting enough playing time. And we discussed this last week. We discussed it on Monday. So ultimately, he was traded on, was it Wednesday or Tuesday? Wednesday, I think, for a 6th round pick. So all that talk all off season, what are they going to do about outside linebacker depth? And that depth lasts 7 games. Now Ingram is a member of the Chiefs, and the Steelers have a 6th round pick for next year. Yippee. I guess if you watched Mike Tomlin's press conference on Tuesday, if you heard it, or if you read the quotes, he seemed to indicate that he'd much rather go the traditional route that they've gone over the years when it comes to depth, and that's draft people, get them in the system, help them develop into something, and hopefully they could be quality depth while they're developing into a future starter, maybe. Because that's how it used to really be for the Steelers. They would their depth mostly consisted of draft picks that they were hoping that would develop into future starters. And if that wasn't their depth, it was a journeyman who knew his role and was content with that, and was a really good, solid player when he contributed, whether it was as a backup during games or as a starter when a player was injured. But it seems like they kind of went away from that philosophy 7-8 years ago. They started signing these higher profile veteran players like Garrett Blount, and of course Melvin Ingram. Sort of signing players like that to be their backups. These former All-Pro, Pro Bowl players who really couldn't find any suitors in the league as a starting player, so they had to accept the role as a backup. And you're talking about Ingram being the latest, but before that it was James Harrison a few years ago, and before that, of course, it was Blount. And they all kind of got disgruntled with their playing time, and it was an ugly divorce in each case. And to me, I hope they go back to their old way of doing things, and that's I hope drafting these players and bringing them in. And yeah, they're unproven, but that's life. I don't know what, I think it's social media has a big influence on this, but somewhere along the way, fans and the media just started putting pressure on the team from the outside to it wasn't just good enough to go out and get a journeyman to be a backup center or a backup cornerback or a backup this or that, or a draft pick to fill that role. it had to be somebody that had a really impressive resume. And to me, that just doesn't work because, like I talked about last week, like I wrote about the other day, so many of these guys have huge egos, and they just don't want to accept the fact that they have to be a backup. I mean, look at Ingram. I mean, he had more of he had more snaps than Harrison and Blunt combined, I think. I mean, when his first 6 games here before they traded him, and it still wasn't good enough for him. He still thought, well, I should be the starter. I'm better than Alex Highsmith. And to me, I think the perfect backup, the perfect veteran backup player, when you talk about a guy like that, somebody that's going to be content with his role, it's a guy like Mike Logan. It's a guy like Tyrone Carter. It's a guy like Arthur Moats. Mewelde Moore. Remember Mewelde Moore? I mean, how many valuable reps did he give this franchise over the few years that he was here? Those are the kind of players that I think you should bring in if you're looking for a veteran to provide you with quality depth. Yeah, I think somewhere along the way, the fans and the media, they wanted not just depth, they wanted a ironclad insurance policy when it came to the backups on the Steelers, any NFL team really. They wanted somebody that was quote unquote starter capable, and when they say starter capable, they mean Pro Bowl capable to come in and when he takes over for the injured starter, you don't miss a beat. Well, that's just not how it usually works in the NFL. Life in the NFL is much more difficult than that. And with the salary cap being what it is, unrestricted free agency, it's hard to have that kind of depth. You know, I think, again, to repeat, they should get back to their old ways of developing players and while they're backups and not bringing these veterans in, these former Pro Bowl players to be your backups. I just don't think that's the way to go. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people don't agree with me. I know next offseason there's going to be fans clamoring for this veteran or that veteran to come in and be a quality reserve. And, you know, to me, I hope they abandoned that philosophy once and for all. So those are my thoughts for tonight. I will now open things up to some questions and comments before I call it a night. Let's see what we have here. What do we got here? I haven't seen any quality comments yet that would. Buck Dancer says of Taco Charlton, who's now presumably the top backup at outside linebacker. They promoted him to the 53-man roster after initially signing him to the practice squad. He says Taco is another Jarvis Jones. Well, even if he is, Buck Dancer, to kind of reinforce what I already said, well, that's okay because he's a backup. And when you're talking about a reserve player to come in and give you decent reps, whether it's, as a rotational player during a game or as a starter because of injury, then I think you're thinking of a player of that, of an Anthony Chickillo caliber kind of player, somebody who can be adequate, but it's probably not going to be a difference maker when he's in there. So if Taco Charlton's just Jarvis Jones, well, that's okay. Because if Jarvis Jones was like a 5th round pick who had the career that he did as a backup, people probably would have liked him better, you know? So if that's all Taco is, then that's fine. All right. And Rajon 39 says he thinks Taco might blossom. Well, I guess we'll see. But again, I think I like where they're at with their starting outside linebackers. I like Alex Highsmith a lot. And of course, TJ Watt. So, and Mark Tobin says Will Highsmith get laid back, meaning will he get complacent because there is no Ingram caliber guy pushing him? No, he will not get complacent because that guy has a motor that never stops. When you read everything you read about the guy coming out of college, I mean, we're talking about a guy who was a walk-on at Charlotte, not a walk-on at USC or Notre Dame. He was a walk-on at Charlotte, and then he became the star of the team eventually. So that to me, that shows a guy who's incredibly determined to be the best he can be, and he doesn't need anybody to push him. He's a self-motivator. He has a motor that never quits. So Alex Highsmith, I don't care if it's me as the backup. He's not gonna get complacent. He's gonna still try to be the best player he can possibly be. So no, I'm not worried about Alex Highsmith's motor and motivation at all. And Michael O'Malley asked, Tony, what do you really think the Bears have for the Steelers this week? Do you think this game could be a game we get rolling? Yes, I do. Although I think the Bears have a good defense. Obviously, they have Khalil Mack, who is a difference maker. But I think Justin Fields, with their history against rookie quarterbacks, and he's been struggling, obviously he's very mobile, and he can hurt them that way. But they've had a lot of practice over the years. Practicing for and playing against Lamar Jackson. So I think they're more than capable of shutting down a quarterback like him. And he's certainly, at least up to this point, hasn't proven that he's nearly the player that Jackson is. So, if they can just keep him one-dimensional, then, and take away the run and just force him to pass, I think it'll be a great night for the Steelers. Justin Fields is really struggling, and I think this is time that the Steelers defense makes life miserable for him. And Steeler Chick 46 says Mac hasn't practiced yet. Maybe he won't play. Well, if he doesn't play, well, that's another reason why Pittsburgh should have an easy night on Monday. And Russ Oberstein says he thinks that Najee Harris will have his best rushing game. We already had 122 yards, I think, against the Broncos, Russ. So 120, but that would still be pretty good, even 120. But I think he's going to have a lot of 120 games in his future. Steeler Pittsburgh says that Cam and TJ Watt will be chasing Justin Fields all night. I kind of think you're right. Monka S says, do you want Big Ben back next year? Honestly, I mean, unless his play improves dramatically from now until the end of the season, like if he shows, obviously he's never going to be what he was in 2014, 2015, that kind of player, but unless he improves dramatically over what we've seen since like the middle of last year, no, I think it's time to move on. It doesn't mean they can't be good this year, but I think, Tom Brady, and maybe to a lesser extent, Aaron Rodgers now with his MVP performance last year, I think those guys have really skewed the perception of what a quarterback can be into his late 30s and early 40s. I think more often than not, those guys kind of hit a wall at a certain age, and I think you have to move on. Tom Brady's a freak of nature. And as far as Aaron Rodgers, he's not even 38 years old yet. So, I mean, he might fall off the cliff before his 40th. We saw it with Peyton Manning. Eli kind of fell off the cliff. Drew Brees. So, I think it's time that they again, unless they go on one heck of a run and he has a heck of a resurgence, and I think it's time to move on next year. So, no, I don't really want him back as of right now. But times can change, opinions can change. All right. George Teston says Brady was pampered by the NFL and the rest. Well, I mean, most big-time quarterbacks have been throughout the years, but I don't think, I mean, pampered or not, it's hard to deny the exceptional career that Brady's had. He's maybe the best ever, and he's still playing at a high level. He's still throwing the ball exceptionally well. I don't know how he does it, but it's it's probably a once in a century kind of a player. That's what he is right now. And Owen David asks, Tony, where did I go? Here we go. Tony, do you think Steelers should draft a rookie quarterback or go for a vet? And which vet? I think they should go for a rookie. That's my opinion. I think that's how you do it. They have a pretty good team. They're building a pretty good team. They're young on both sides of the ball now. So I think you bring a rookie in, and you let him grow with the rest of the team, a la Big Ben with the Steelers in 04 and 05 and 06, those years. I think that's how you do it. Now, if they were going to bring a vet in, oh, gosh, I don't know. I mean, people keep, talking about Aaron Rodgers, but he seems like he's such a handful. I mean, as much as people talk about Ben being a diva, and he certainly is, and he certainly has had his issues over the years, what Aaron Rodgers is doing right now, this year alone, I don't know if you want that on your team. And I love Aaron Rodgers. I'm a big fan, but just everything about the guy right now just screams big, massive headache. And I don't know if you want to take that on. Other than him, I mean, there's any number of vets out there. I mean, I like Teddy Bridgewater a lot. I don't know. I can't really think of anybody that would blow my socks off if they brought him in here, other than, somebody that would, I don't know. I really, Jameis Winston, but I guess he's injured now. So other than Teddy Bridgewater, I really can't think of anybody that I think could come in here and help this team. But to me, I would go with a rookie. But it all depends on where they're drafting and who's available and if it's worth drafting a quarterback at that point. And I'll just Monka S says, should the Steelers trade for Rodgers? No, I don't think they should. Because first of all, even if he was like the model citizen, it's just going to cost too much in terms of draft picks and the salary they're going to have to take on next year. Because don't forget, well, obviously you said, should they trade for him? He's going to command a big salary next year. That plus the drama that he's going to potentially bring here, the diva attitude, the my way, the highway, way he goes about things. I mean, that's not going to change just because he comes to Pittsburgh. He's used to being that way. And the more I watch Rodgers and his demeanor and the way he goes about business, it maybe it's not a surprise that he lasted as long as he did in the 05 draft. Because really, I mean, you look at his talent, he should have been the number one pick in that draft and not Alex Smith. But there's a great show. It's on YouTube, I guess. What they call it, I forget the name of the show, but they chronicle so many previous drafts, and they chronicled that year and how Rodgers fell, and so suspiciously, almost mysteriously, why did he drop? And yes, a lot of it had to do with the fact that many teams did not need quarterbacks after the who was it that drafted Smith? Was it the 49? Yeah, after the 49ers drafted Smith, but still. For a guy as talented as Rodgers to go from possibly being the number one overall pick to falling into the 20s, to me that just screams character issues. So no, I don't think they should trade for Rodgers next year. There's one. Thank you, George. I couldn't think of it. I was trying to rack my brains. Russell Wilson. There's somebody I would bring in. He's a good guy, good teammate. I'm sure he has his diva tendencies. All quarterbacks do. But he seems like a really good guy, and he's younger. And, if you put him in next year, provided they could get him for a decent enough price, I think the Steelers, provided they have the same kind of defense and provided their offense continues to mainly their offensive line continues to improve, I think they would be contenders next year. So. Russ Oberstein says I would give up the next 2 first rounders for Wilson. Well, yeah, I mean, that's probably what it's going to cost. Somewhere along something similar anyway. Kyle Johnson asks if Ben doesn't want to move on and the Steelers do, does he still retire a Steeler? My gut tells me he would retire because he has, obviously he's married and he has 3 kids. Yeah, I don't see him. It wouldn't ruin his legacy as a Steeler at all. But I just don't see him moving on. I mean, you hear how he talks. He doesn't really go anywhere. He's a homebody now. His whole life outside of football is his family and kids. I don't see him uprooting his family. As young as they all are. I mean, his kids are all, I think his oldest is 9 or not even 9. So yeah, I don't see him uprooting his family just to play. I mean, you never say never. I mean, like I always say, once these guys retire, they can't, it's not like any other profession. Once you retire as a professional athlete, you can't just pick it up 10 years later and do it again. So, but I just don't see it. I think once he's done, he's done. He's made all the money he's ever going to want. The only thing that would possibly motivate him to come back would be a burning desire to keep playing. And I just don't see him wanting to do that outside of Pittsburgh. So yeah, I think if they decide that they want to move on more than he does, I think he'll begrudgingly retire. Like Troy, like Hines Ward, so many others in the past. Michael O'Malley says Mason Rudolph will play when Ben retires. That might be the plan. I mean, they signed him for 1 more year. By a lot of accounts, they really seem to like him as an organization. And maybe they want to, from an egotistical standpoint, maybe they want to justify that quote unquote first round grade they said they had on him. And in fact, they moved up in the 3rd round to draft him back in 2018. It wouldn't surprise me. But I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one. Clarence Washington says Pickett would look good in black and gold, meaning Kenny Pickett, the University of Pittsburgh's quarterback, a guy who has really done wonders for his draft stock and might not be available when the Steelers pick next year. That's how much his draft stock has risen. He might be a top 5 pick. You never know with these quarterbacks. So many of these quarterbacks are drafted based on need and not necessarily overall talent. And, if he's like a top 30 talent coming into the draft, he might get drafted 5th in a top 5 because of need and because of the constant need at that position in the NFL. So, but yeah, Kenny Pickett, I'm really excited about him. And yeah, Pitt stumbled last week against Miami, but I'm really looking forward to see what he can do over the next, what is it? What are they, 6-2? Next math, 5 games, 6 games, whatever it is. And of course in the bowl game. So on that note, at the 9:53 mark, I think I will call it a night. It's a fun show, a lot of great interaction. And I appreciate you guys as always. And I hope you have fun watching Monday night's game. I anticipate a good Steelers victory. Maybe I should pay attention more to the Bears injury wire, but if Khalil Mack doesn't play, that I think bodes even better for a Steeler victory. But I think it's going to be a comfortable win. Famous last words. But at any rate, I hope you guys enjoy it. And until I talk to you on The Hangover with Brian and Shannon, you all have a great weekend and go Steelers.